Live Audio Wrestling.
And let's go. We're now smoking with the best.
All right, just after 1 a.m. into the second hour. Yeah, football's back, guys. You know, we always talk about how football affects wrestling ratings. Well, it affects this show as well. It does
indeed.
Because it bumps us back to midnight every Sunday night. But that just pushes this gentleman an hour back. But he is with us once again. But my goodness, Dan Lavransky, I never thought it would happen.
I know.
Broken Dave Meltzer. We talked about the fact, we were just talking, Dave, before the break about how there's so much content. And it's just gets to a point where it's too much. And I've been listening to your shows, and for the first time I've ever heard you say, you know what? I'm not watching this pay-per-view tonight, at least not watching it live. They broke you, Dave. They broke you.
Oh, no. I mean, I just have to, you just can't. You have to do something, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, it was like yesterday or today, and of the two shows, yesterday was the bigger show, so I picked yesterday, and then today. I'm watching the show,
yes,
but
just not live.
I didn't watch it today.
All right, well, we won't spoil it for you, because you have said, we were talking off air, that you don't know what's happening with it yet. But one thing you do know about, and we didn't know the full details behind it, was Randy Orton was pulled from tonight's show from a match that was fairly high up on the card, and considering the slim roster was quite important.
Probably the number 2 match on the card. Mm-hmm. Really, look at the rest of the card.
Yeah.
Oh, Dave, trust me, we've looked at the rest of that card.
We've seen it.
You're going to get it.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Randy Orton. This seems very strange to me. What was it? We've heard concussion, and then when did WWE know that he wasn't going to be able to wrestle?
Well, he didn't know he wasn't going to be able to wrestle for sure until today. But they've known about the concussion and kept it quiet for 3 weeks. So it's kind of, and it's a concussion. I mean, like, we all know that when it comes to a concussion, when you're not cleared, that there's never like, well, is it he'll be ready in a week, he'll be ready in 2 weeks. You don't know. So to me, I mean, I'll tell you what, real sick on this one. They had no excuse to advertise him whatsoever until he was cleared first, and they spent 3 weeks advertising that he was going to be on the show. And, I think that that's a really bad deal.
Well, it's kind of mind-boggling, Dave. Is it like, did they think the rest of the show was so weak that they had to draw people with this? Like, it just doesn't seem to make sense.
Well, the rest of the show was so weak that they probably did, especially when they decided to take Jordan and Gable off the show.
Right.
Which I understand why they would do that, but when you really looked at it, it's a really weak lineup, and the ticket sales weren't good, but you can say all that, but there's no excuse for what they did.
No, not at all.
Dave, we're not going to get into the pay-per-view. Obviously, you haven't watched it, but this week in WWE kind of went off the rails in a bunch of different segments and scenarios. In particular, one that we have not touched on this week on the show in the first hour, but I wanted to touch on with you, the Sasha Banks promo from Monday night. I thought was absolutely horrendous. And people had come to me and said, well, Jay, it's a lot like Mark Henry. And I said, no, it's not.
No, it's not.
It's a
Mark Henry. Mark Henry was not over an injury. Mark Henry was something, it was not a spoof of the Daniel Bryan thing. Spoof, probably not the right word, but it was not a takeoff of the Daniel Bryan thing.
And that's
the Mark
what this
Henry thing was something completely different. Also, the other thing is the Mark Henry thing was actually, like, great.
Oh, yeah.
And this was terrible.
Yes.
And that's part of it, too.
So this was basically, it was parodying, and I hate to use the word parody, but it was a play off Daniel Bryan injury angle, his dreams being shattered, Edge the same thing, and now you have Sasha Banks come out and do this, and it was poorly acted, poorly scripted.
Yeah.
And why is a babyface doing this?
I can't really answer that. I have no idea. I mean, I know why the script was the way the script was, and that's because it's, they're so adamant about getting Stephanie over and things like that. So and their brand over. So they gave her this wording that, like, in a million years she would never say in real life, and you could tell.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the difference between, like, the Daniel Bryan thing, in the sense Daniel Bryan, when he did his thing, aside from the fact that it was real, it wasn't scripted at all. He did it, and it was sincere. And this one, I mean, it was so obvious that she was trying to, recite memorized words that she didn't really buy, and it just threw her off the rail. And I had heard, like, in the afternoon on Monday afternoon, that people knew it was bad, but until it was over, they didn't realize how bad, is what I was told.
Everything about it was illogical, even to the point where she was collecting cans to buy tickets. You don't think Snoop would have got her in certain places?
I know, no kidding.
Like, they play that up, Snoop introduced her.
I don't know this to be the case, but somebody told me that was actually true of A.J. Lee, so they kind of took an A.J. Lee story and gave it to her.
Oh, interesting.
That wouldn't surprise me at all.
No,
But
not at all.
still stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, speaking of A.J. Lee, let's switch over.
That's a good segue.
And talk about her husband.
Yeah.
Last night, CM Punk, he did make it to the octagon, Dave. He didn't last very long. But after all of this experiment, what do you take out of it?
Reality, you know what I mean? It was like the clock struck 12. I mean, it was, his age was going against him. That's all it was. I mean, I guess with the benefit of hindsight and you look back and everything, I think that one of the things was they gave him too tough an opponent.
Yeah.
I mean, if it was Scott Coker, he would have found someone who he could have beaten, or if not, at least someone who wouldn't have waxed him. I mean, because when you really look at this fight in hindsight, I mean, it seemed this way all the way in the build-up, that this was going to be a really one-sided fight, and it was. Too much so, really, I mean, I guess, I think in the UFC's mind, their idea is we're going to try to create a star off of him. If Punk wins, that's cool, that's great. But if Punk loses, we get some benefit out of this because we get this guy, Mickey Gall, a good-looking kid who, talks good. I mean, as far as that aspect goes, as far as the guy they picked, he did a fantastic job.
He was. His promo after the fight was amazing. Like, he became a star last night.
Yeah, so they got something out of it, whereas, let's just say, I mean, if you remember, the guys that Herschel Walker fought, just because that popped in my mind, it was like, if by some chance those guys actually had beaten Herschel Walker, even though there was, almost no chance of that happening, Strikeforce would have had nothing because they were absolute nothings, right? So at least they're looking at this 24-year-old prospect. I mean, he's only 3-0, but it's 3 first-round finishes, and who knows how he'll be, but he has a good look, and people know who he is now, and he's creative and smart, which again, a lot that puts him a leg up on a lot of fighters too.
It's true. So what do you think happens with Punk now, Dave? Because Dana White made some comments about he really doesn't think Punk should have had his first fight in the UFC. Do you think Punk stays with him? Do you think he drops down to a smaller promotion?
So here's the deal. I think that in the middle of the week when the pay-per-view numbers come in, you're going to have this question from their side because reality, when the fight was over, my first thought was, okay, it's experiment. He can't fight in UFC again. If he wants to, he said he wants to fight again, he can fight again. But let's look at on the other side. Bellator will sign him in a heartbeat.
Yep.
In a heartbeat. So do you want to, let's just say the pay-per-view numbers, and I don't know what they are. Let's just say they do 600,000 buys, which would mean that 330,000 of those buys came from Punk. I mean, that may be way high. But let's just say that there's that number. I'm just doing this as a theoretical. Do you really want to give that guy to your opposition? Now, if it's 310,000 buys, then you will look at it in a completely different way, and then you would go, you know what? I mean, it's his first fight. It didn't mean that much. I mean, he'll probably still, realistically for TV ratings, he'll probably mean a lot in the second fight anyway because a lot of people didn't see it, and it's still CM Punk, and he's a star. But, I think the pay-per-view number may affect the decision on do we want to hand this guy to Bellator because if he wants to fight again, I mean, there's not a doubt that Bellator will take him and that they will find an opponent that will be a lot more competitive with him, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it's the same scenario with Kimbo, who's still a ratings draw, but UFC ended up cutting him. Now, on the flip side of that, let's talk about Mickey Gall because Mickey Gall goes out, has had it planned out who he was going to call out and called out Sage Northcutt after his fight. Now, Northcutt's currently fighting at 155 and Mickey's at 170. Do you see UFC trying to make this fight happen?
Yeah, I think it's a great fight to have. I mean, for both guys, because it's kind of like a fair fight, and they're both kind of stars, and you really wouldn't want to match either of them against anyone who's good right now because they're both new. So I think the only issue is the weight thing. I don't know if Mickey Gall can cut 15. Sage has fought it well before. So he can do it, but I don't know, so it's just a question of meeting in, the weight class that they want to do it. But before he even did the call out, in my mind, that was the guy. If I was thinking okay, because I always do this right after the fight, who should they fight? And with Mickey, it was Sage Northcutt. So I think he called out the perfect guy.
Should be very interesting to see what happens. Yeah.
A guy who just gets it. Like,
Yeah,
they really
it's
lucked out with
obvious.
Mickey Gall.
It's obvious he understands how to promote himself and how to get himself over because he did that
even
for
just,
sure.
just from the entrance music alone.
Yes.
Yeah, right. That's right.
And
Yep.
it's good.
Because it's like everyone, you know what I mean? It's like his entrance music's going to be over because everyone knows it now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very true, very true. And you know what? Even with CM Punk using Cult of Personality,
Wow, he
finally
has to.
going to it, huge pop last night,
he has
which
to.
was great. All right, so they understand what they're doing. Apparently, despite being a savvy veteran, not so savvy, Travis Brown does not understand the rules of fighting.
Yeah, that was
Well,
very
I don't know if
strange.
it's so much Travis as the freaking referee and the commission there they were terrible.
So for those who didn't see this, last night, Fabrizio Verdum punched Travis Brown, hit his thumb. His thumb either broke or dislocated, and he called a timeout.
Which there is no time.
That's not
There is
allowed.
no time. No, that should have been the end of the fight right there. He turned his back. He didn't want to fight. It's over. And somehow he fought another 2.5 rounds.
This was so. I mean, thank goodness that Verdum ended up with the win here, because if not, the fight would have been a total sham.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know. You would almost have to have protested, and then the
Yes.
commission would have to rule that they just completely blew. But it wasn't even just. It was like the confusion when the doctor's in there. Well, do we let the fight go? It's like, don't you know the rules?
Yeah.
It's like it's over when it wasn't an eye poke, it wasn't a groin shot, it was a legal blow, and he stopped the fight. You can't stop the fight for a broken finger and keep the fight going. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah. So, and speaking of rules, Dave, have you heard anything about Verdum after the fight there with his kick to the opposing coach? Is there going to be any repercussions coming out of
commission
this?
Said no, and I don't understand that either.
Maybe
It's
everyone
like-
just doesn't like Edmund, and he deserved the kick.
Yeah, but you can't say that.
No.
I mean, I
I know.
know that's the easy way of saying it, and Edmund started by mouthing off, but you still can't have a fighter kicking a second.
Yeah,
even if the guy's swearing at you.
Yeah, I'm surprised if there's going to be nothing coming out. Like not a fine, nothing?
I heard that's what the commission was saying, that nothing's going to come of it. That and I don't know how you come to that conclusion.
Yeah.
If it was Nevada, it would not be the same.
In my opinion, Travis Brown should have been the one kicking Edmund, just for the way that he's been performing lately.
Oh God, both of those guys look bad in the fight.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Edmund. Edmund's not exactly coach of the year. I mean, Anna Marie, Rhonda's mom, I think she pegged him pretty right.
Looks like. Let's talk about the main event last night. It was Stipe Miocic fighting in front of his hometown, which was a great decision by UFC putting him in there against Alistair Overeem. Really unfortunate that Miocic tapped, though, right, Dave?
Yeah.
Can you? It was so funny because, I mean, everyone's trying to say, well, he was, that Alistair Overeem was knocked out, so he wasn't really knowing what he was saying. I watched him, and I thought that it's like this guy knew he was full of it.
Yep.
And when they said, let's look at the replay, he looked like a kid who just got caught shoplifting.
Well, let's think about the history of Alistair Overeem here. He's a jerk. He's a guy that evaded drug tests. Oh, he is just does not seem like a trustworthy individual.
No.
I was so in favor of what Joe Rogan did last night.
Yep.
I thought he made the perfect play, and whoever radioed into his ear to get him to do that, I thought that was wonderful. Calling Overeem out on that garbage just made UFC look totally pro there, because he was compromising their champion and that victory in doing what Overeem did.
Absolutely. Oh, the idea that he tapped when
Yeah.
it was actually a completely clean and great win.
Yes.
The guy he was knocked down.
Sure.
But I mean, you have to think that fight really surprised me. It was a fun fight, but it was weird watching Overeem run away for so much of the fight. Like, I mean, literally run away. When have you ever seen someone like it's not backpedaling? It was like
Running.
it was like running, and the other guy was running after him. It was like they were doing a freaking relay, and they were about to pass the baton.
It was definitely one of the weirdest UFC shows I've ever seen.
Oh yeah.
Quickly before we wrap, Dave, can just a little bit about Lord Littlebrook for some of the fans who might. I mean, really, when you think about it now, I mean, the last time we had little people matches, I mean, that's a long time ago. So, Lord Littlebrook's one of was actually the booker for the midgets back then,
He was
right?
the booker, and I mean, Lord Littlebrook and Sky Low would probably have been the two most famous midgets of all time. And he was. In that era, he was always considered the best worker of those guys. So he passed away a couple days ago. He was. He started like in '49 when the midget wrestling first started.
Wow.
He was like a trapeze artist in a circus from England, and the circus was running through Detroit, I believe, but somewhere in Michigan. And then the circus went broke, so he was in Michigan. and just pretty much left off. And someone suggested, to go to Jack Britton and Burt Ruby's gym because they were training midget wrestlers. Another midget wrestler who was just starting, so he was in the troop. So this is like 49-50.
Wow.
And so he went all through the 50s, 60s, all through the 70s. I mean, he was full-time until probably 78-ish.
Wow.
And then, still, he was at WrestleMania 3 in 1987 and wrestled into the 90s from time to time. His two sons, Bobby and Chris, one was Little Kato and Karate Kid and Karate Kid Chris Doobie, and Bobby, the other one was Bobby Dean and Beautiful Bobby and all this. So, I mean, they still wrestle, and they were two of the top midget wrestlers, until that era of midget wrestling pretty much ended.
Right. So I'm guessing a biography on him in the next Observer?
Yes. I've already written it. Yes.
Very good. And, of course, we'll have coverage of you'll have coverage of tonight's event, which you're about to go watch now, right, Dave?
Yes, I am.